Okay, good Shabbos. Oh, good. So, Saba, if you're watching, let's see here. All right. Saba, if you're watching, anybody else is watching, I'm trying to test the sound. Let's see. What's a good one? Yom Zeh Yisrael Ora V'Simcha Ora V'Simcha Shabbat Menucha Yom Zeh Yisrael Ora V'Simcha Shabbat Menucha. So I see. All right, so again, if you're watching already, kudos to you, and I'm going to call, let's see how it sounded on his end. So this is you're going to be strange, because you're going to hear yourself talking to me, talking to you. So did you listen?
Yeah.
So it sounds good. Yes, they are very unlikely. They can't hear us talking on the phone, but mostly I just wanted to make sure you could hear me clearly, that it didn't clip, that it didn't sort of fade in and out and stuff like that.
All right, so wait a minute, so let me mute the phone and then test it.
Okay. All right, I'm just going to sing something, you tell me, okay? Yom Zeh Yisrael Ora V'Simcha Ora V'Simcha Shabbat Menucha Yom Zeh Yisrael Ora V'Simcha Shabbat Menucha. So it'll probably take a second to catch up to you. That's the way it works. Oh. Okay. Oh. Yeah, it's 30 seconds. It's about the way it's supposed to be. Okay, so good. It sounds good on your end. Howard's here, so our minion has arrived, so it's time to start. Okay, good show. All right. I was just on the phone with the boss, my boss, Peter Geffen, telling me.
Oh, Peter?
Peter. Well, because you're the only one that would never have experienced this, but because you're always with us here. But on the recording stuff, the sound quality was really middling. Next door is great because we got this big expensive system, but I can't schlep it back and forth. It's right. So I keep tinkering week after week after week after week. I finally this morning, I think I broke through. And so now this should sound not exactly the same as next door. And most importantly is when Lauren gets back, the guitar presents some challenges for the way that this one streams out. But I think I will have fixed that also.
All right.
And since I can do it on the laptop, then I don't have to schlep the whole computer from downstairs. Which is a... Yes, it is. Yeah,
Right.
It says it in the Torah there somewhere, I think, right? Thou shalt avoid pains in the ass.
Is it time yet? Is it time that you want?
Yeah, I'm on. Pause for a second. I don't think anybody's...
I wanted to talk to you.
Okay, so we'll talk...
Huh?
We can talk right after service.
After.
After. Okay, well, Good Shabbos. We certainly know Peter Gavin is watching. Whether anybody else is a 9:30 kind of person, I don't know. But I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom. And since I was singing it before as a warm-up, we'll do it as a nigun, but as one of our Gavin family melodies, which is one of the Zmirot, one of the songs that you would traditionally sing on Shabbat, and sort of gets you in a Shabbat melody mode and all of that. Oftentimes around the dinner, lunch table, things of that nature. But let's see if we can do it as a nigun. Yai lai la 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 lai, yai lai 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 lai, yai lai la lai, la la lai lai, yai lai la lai, yai lai lai, yai lai lai lai. Yai la la, yai la la la. Okay, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. We'll begin our service on page 186, beginning with thanks and gratitude. Modeh ani lefanecha melech hai v'kayam. Modeh ani lefanecha melech hai v'kayam. Modeh ani lefanecha, modeh ani lefanecha. Melech chai v'kayam shechazarta bi nishmati b'chemla rabba emunatecha. All right, turn now to page 192. Howard, do you think Morty's coming today? Should we open up the door?
I doubt it.
Yeah, I was going to say, if weather's not so great. So, okay. Just wanted to make sure I didn't forget. All right, page 192. Ma tohu ohalecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael. Ma tohu ohalecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael. Turn now to page 194 and read a blessing for our bodies together in Hebrew. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher yatzar et adam bechokma, uvaravo nekavim nekavim, chalulim chalulim. Galui v'yadua lifnei chisech vodecha. She'im yipatech echad mehem, lo yisatem echad mehem. Yefshar lehitkayem v'lamod lefanecha. Baruch atah Adonai rofeh chol basar umafli la'asot. We'll turn now to page 196. In walks the Rav. We're building here. Good to see you, man. Good to see you. On page 196. Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehorahi. 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 We'll join together in English at the bottom of the page. My God, the soul you have given me is pure. You created it, you shaped it, you breathed it into me, and you protect it within me. For as long as my soul is within me, I offer thanks to you, Adonai, my God and God of my ancestors, source of all creation, sovereign of all souls. Praised are you, Adonai, in whose hand is every living soul and the breath of humankind. Baruch atah Adonai, asher biado nefesh kol chai, veruach kol besar ish. We rise in body or spirit as we turn to page 198, Nisim B'chol Yom. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lasach b'bina lachin meyom u'ben laila. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam pokeach ivrim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam matir asurim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam zokef kefufim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam rokah haaretz al hamayim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamechin mitzadei gaber. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam malbihi sharumim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hanoten le'aev koach. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamavir shinam einai utnuma me'af apai. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shasani b'tzelem Elohim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shasani ben chorin. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shasani Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam ozer Yisrael b'gvura. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam oter Yisrael b'tifarah. Okay, everyone, please be seated. We're on page 204. We'll start by reading the Hebrew together at the top and the English at the bottom. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. O Adonai our God, let the words of Torah be sweet in our mouths and the mouths of your people Israel, so that we, our descendants, and the descendants of all your people Israel, may know you by studying your Torah for its own sake. Blessed are you, Adonai, who teaches Torah to your people Israel. Baruch atah Adonai hamelamed Torah l'amo Yisrael. Page 206. Elu devarim she'en lahem shiur shalom ochel pirotehem ba'olam hazeh ve'al keren kayemet lo le'olam haba ve'elu hen kibud ahavaim ugmilut chasadim והשכמת בית המדרש שחרית וערבית והכנסת אורחים וביקור חולים והכנסת כלה לוויית המת ועיון תפילה והבאת שלום בין אדם לחברו ותלמוד תורה כנגד כולם. We rise again in body or spirit as we turn to page 212 for the opening blessing of Pezukei de Zimra. Baruch shehamar v'haya haolam baruch hu Baruch hoseh bereshit Baruch homer v'yoseh Baruch hozer u'mekayem Baruch merachem al haaretz Baruch merachem al habriot Baruch meshalem sachar tov l're'av Baruch haylad v'kayam lanetzach Baruch pohodeh u'matziel Baruch shemo b'shvachot u'b'zmirot negadelcha u'nshabechecha nefercha v'nazkir shimcha v'namlichecha malkeinu Eloheinu yachid chei ha'olamim Melech meshubach u'mafar adayat shemo hagadol Baruch atah Adonai Melech mehulal vatishvachot. Please be seated. We're on page 214, second line down. Tov lehodot l'Adonai Tov lehodot l'Adonai Ulezamer Leshimcha Elyon Tov lehodot l'Adonai Lehagid baboker chasdecha Lehagid baboker chasdecha Ve'emunatcha b'halelot Ve'emunatcha b'halelot Tov lehodot l'Adonai אסור ולנבל, על היגיון בכינור. כי שימחתני אדוני בפועלך, למעשה ידיך רנן. מגנו מעשיך ים, מאוד עמקו מחשבותיך. מגנו מעשיך ים, מאוד עמקו מחשבותיך. מגנו מעשיך ים, מאוד עמקו מחשבותיך. אשרי יושבי ביתך, עוד יעללוך, עוד יעללוך. אשרי יושבי ביתך, עוד יעללוך, עוד יעללוך. סלה שעה. ואנחנו נברך ים, מעתה ועד עולם, מעתה ועד עולם, מעתה ועד עולם. הללויה, 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 hallelujah. Psalm 150, page 218. Hallelujah, 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 el bekodsho, hallelujah, birkiauzo, hallelujah, bigvurotav, hallelujah, kerov kulo, hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Hallelujah, 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 beteka hashofar, hallelujah, benevel bechinor, hallelujah, betofu machol, hallelujah, beminim vehugav, hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Hallelujah, 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 Betziot le Shama, hallelujah, Betziot le Trua, Kol Anshama te hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Nishmat kol echai, tevarech et shimcha Adonai Eloheinu. Continue silently. All right, page 220. Ilufinu male shira kayam ulshonehinu rina kamon galav Desivtotenu shevach kemarchevei rakia Veinenu meirot kashemesh vechayareach Veyadenu frusot kenishrei shamayim Veragleinu kalot kayalot Ein anachnu maspikim lehodot lecha Adonai Eloheinu Ve'Elohei Avotenu Ve'imotenu. Can you silently? We're on page 222, the second paragraph down. Shochenad marhom v'kadosh shemo v'chatuv ranenu tzadikim b'Adonai yesharim na'avah tehillah Befi sharim titala uvdivrei tzadikim titbarach ubilshon chasidim titromam uvekerev kedoshim titkadash uvmakehalot ribevotam chabei Israel berinahit ba'am Shimcha malkeinu bechol dor Ador yababai yababai bye 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 yababai yababai bye bye Yai bye bye hi bye bye yababai bye 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 Ay baba ay baba ay bye bye. Your eyes and body, your spirit, as we conclude Pezukah de Zimra on page 223. You remain standing through the Chatzi Kaddish and the Baruch Hu on the next pages. Yishtabach shimecha alad malkeinu Ha'el ha'melech ha'gadol v'ha'kadosh b'shamayim u'va'aretz Ki lecha na'e Adonai Eloheinu Elohei Avotenu ve'imotenu Shir shvachal v'zimra ha'ozu memshala ha'netzach Gedula u'kvura tila v'tiferet kedusha u'malchut Brachot ve'odaot me'ata v'ad olam Baruch ata Adonai El melech gadol batishpachot El ha'odaot Adonai niflaot Abocher b'shirei zimra melech el Chei ha'olamim Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Be'amad yivrach yirtei v'yamlich malchutei V'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael Ba'agala u'bizman kariv v'imeru Amen Yesh meraba mevarach la'lam li'almei almayam Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitbar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitale v'yitalal shemei dekucha Leila min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata damiran be'alma v'imeru Amen Barechu et Adonai HaMevorach Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam Vahed. We stood for you. If there was something to praise, it is walking into the room is Betsy. Betsy, it's good to see you, brother. I think I saw you and Kathy going into the church as I was driving by yesterday, and I wanted to yell at Betsy, but I realized that it's probably not a thing to yell at cars and people. It's but it's very sweet. Yeah, exactly right. Oh, what a great, okay, we're off to a good start. Good Shabbos start here. Okay, we're on page 228. Let's start by reading together in the English at the bottom and then the Hebrew above. Praised are you, Adonai our God, sovereign of the universe, creator of light and darkness, who makes peace and fashions all things. In mercy you illumine the world and those who live upon it. In your goodness you daily renew creation. How numerous are your works, Adonai, in wisdom you form them all, filling the earth with your creatures. Be praised, Adonai our God, for the excellent work of your hands, and for the lights you created may they glorify you. Shine a new light upon Zion, that we all may swiftly merit its radiance. Praised are you, Adonai, creator of all heavenly lights. Or Chadash, Al Zion Ta'ir. Or Chadash, Al Zion Ta'ir. V'nizkechu lanu me'era le'oro. V'nizkechu lanu me'era le'oro. Yadadai dai bim bim bam, yadadai dai bim bam, yadadai dai bim bim bam, yadadai dai dai. Yadadai dai bim bim bam, yadadai dai bim bam, yadadai dai bim bim bam, yadadai dai dai. Baruch atah Adonai, Yotzer HaMeorot. On page 230, we'll start reading together at the top in English and then the Hebrew at the bottom. How deeply you have loved us, Adonai our God, gracing us with surpassing compassion. On account of our forebears whose trust led you to teach them the laws of life, be gracious to us, teaching us as well. O merciful one, have mercy on us by making us able to understand and discern, to heed, learn, and teach, and lovingly to observe, perform, and fulfill all that is in your Torah. V'ha'erinenu b'toratecha v'dahabek limeinu b'mitzvotecha v'heyachen levabeinu le'ahava u'l'yirah et shemecha v'lo nevosh v'lo nikalem v'lo nikashel le'olam v'hen ki v'shem kodshecha hagadol b'adorah b'tachnu Nagila v'nismecha, Nagila v'nismecha b'yeshuatecha, v'havienu l'shalom, me'arba kanfot haaretz, v'tolichenu kol memiut le'artzenu. Kiel poel yeshuot ata uvahanu v'charta v'kerahavtanu l'shimcha hagadol sela b'emet leodot lecha yechelcha b'yahava baruch atah Adonai habocher b'amo Yisrael v'yahava. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. We're on page 234. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol meodecha ve'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavcha hayom al levavecha v'shinatam lebanecha v'dibarta bam v'shivtecha b'veitecha u'v'lechtecha b'derech v'shokbecha u'kumecha u'shartam leot al yadecha v'hayu letotafot b'ninecha u'ktavtam amezuzot beitecha u'visharecha. On page 236. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe lemor dahaber el bnei Yisrael v'amarta alehem v'asu lahem tzitzit al kanfei v'gnehem ledorotam v'nadu al tzitzit כנף בטיל תכלת, והיה לכם לציצית, ראיתם אותו, זכרתם כל מצוות אדוני, ועשיתם אותם, ולא תטורו אחרי לבבכם ואחרי עיניכם, אשר אתם זונים אחריהם, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם אלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, Adonai Elohechem. Amen. We're now on page 238, 4 lines up from the bottom in Hebrew. Tehillah le'elyon baruch hu mevorach Moshe u'Miriam u'bnei Yisrael lechanu shira b'simcha rabba ve'amru chulam micha mocha Ba'elim Adonai mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh nora teilot osef elem ayla shira chadasha shihipchu geulim shnei shimcha sfat hayam יחד כולם הודו והמליכו ואמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד צור ישראל קומה בעזרת ישראל ופדחנו מכה יהודה וישראל גואלנו אדוני צבאות שמו קדוש ישראל ברוך אתה אדוני קהל ישראל. We'll rise in body or spirit as we turn to page 242, and we'll begin the Amidah together and then continue silently. As always, please go at your own pace, and when you're finished, you may be seated. Adonai sefatai tiftachu fi agi tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. If you're still finishing your Amidah, please go at your own pace. For those that have finished, we'll be on page 342. Repetition of, 324.
dyslexic.
Yeah, I think there's a very good chance that it actually is the case. Has been since I was a kid. All right, page 324. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'Konei Hakol, V'Zocher Chastei Avot v'Imahot, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם למען שמו באהבה מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן ברוך אתה אדוני מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני מחיי מתים אתה רב להושיע משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם מכלכל חיים בחסד מחיי מתים ברחמים רבים סומך נופלים ורופך עולים ומתיר אסורים ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר מי כמוך בעל גבורות ומידו מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה ונאמן אתה לחיות מתים ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי המתים. נקדש את שמך בעולם, כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום, ככתוב על יד נביאך, וכרז אל זה ואמר, קדוש קדוש קדוש, אדוני צבאות, מלוא כל הארץ. כבודו אדיר אדירנו אדוני אדוננו מאדיר שמך בכל הארץ ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו אחד הוא אלוהינו הוא אבינו מלכנו ומושיענו והוא ישמיענו ורחמיו לעיני כל חי אני אדוני אלוהיכם, ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהיך ציון, לדור ודור, hallelujah. Page 328. לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש, קדושתך נקדיש, ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש, לעולם לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש. Okay, please be seated. Shabbat Shalom, Marsha. We're on page 329, very top of the page. Yismechu v'malachutecha shomrei 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 Shabbat v'korei oneg Shabbat. Yismechu v'malachutecha shomrei 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 Shabbat v'korei oneg Shabbat. מקדשי שבי שבת, כולם נספרו ויתענגו מטובך שבת, ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי 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 שבת וקוראי עונג שבת. והשביעי רצית בו וקידשתו שבת, חמדת ימים אותו קראת שבת, ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי 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 שבת וקוראי עונג שבת. זכר למעשה Lemase Bereshit Shabbat. Zecher Lemase Bereshit Shabbat. Yismechu v'malechutecha Shomrei Shabbat V'korei oneg Shabbat Eloheinu Eloi Avotenu v'imotenu Ritzei v'imnuchateinu Kadeshenu b'mitzvotecha V'ten chelkeinu b'toratecha Sahabeinu mituvecha V'samechenu b'shuatecha V'taher libeinu Le'ovdecha be'emet Ve'anachilenu Adonai Eloheinu Ay, nay, 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 V'yavav ratzon Shabbat kodshecha v'nuchu ba'Yisrael mekadshei shemecha Baruch atah Adonai Mekadesh HaShabbat. We'll turn now to page 330. We'll read together in English in the middle of the page. On this Shabbat day, as you graciously receive our prayers, help us to hear your call. Grant us enough health to fulfill our duties and the compassion we need to attend to others. Teach us humility that we may perceive our own faults, and grant us the wisdom to be forgiving of others. Give us the courage to be true to our highest selves, and the charity to see the best in those around us. Give us patience enough not to become discouraged, hope enough to overcome all fears for the future, and faith enough to know your presence. O source of blessing, look with favor upon us. May our offerings be acceptable to you. Baruch atah Adonai, she'otcha levadcha b'yirah navon. Page 332, at the very bottom of the page. For the expanding grandeur of creation, worlds known and unknown, galaxies beyond galaxies filling us with awe and challenging our imaginations, modim anachnu lach. For this fragile planet Earth, its times and tides, its sunsets and seasons, modim anachnu lach. For the joy of human life, its wonders and surprises, its hopes and achievements, modim anachnu lach. For human community, our common past and future hope, our oneness transcending all separation, our capacity to work for peace and justice in the midst of hostility and oppression. Modim anachnu lach. For high hopes and noble causes, for faith without fanaticism, for understanding of views not shared. Modim anachnu lach. For all who have labored and suffered for a fair world, who have lived so that others might live in dignity and freedom. Modim anachnu lach. For human liberties and sacred rights, for opportunities to change and grow, to affirm and choose. Modim anachnu lach. We pray that we may live not by our fears, but by our hopes, not by our words, but by our deeds. Baruch atah Adonai, hatov shimcha ulachanai lehodo. Page 334. Sim shalom tova uvracha chen chesed berachamim aleinu Ve'al kol Yisrael Amecha Orcheinu Yotzreinu Kulanu Kechad Ve'or Panecha Ki ve'or Panecha Natata Lanu Adonai Eloheinu Sim Shalom Tova Uvracha Chen v'chesed berachamim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael amecha Torat chaim ve'ahavat chesed u'tzedaka u'bracha berachamim v'chaim v'shalom Sim shalom tova uvracha chen v'chesed berachamim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ועל כל ישראל עמך, וטוב בעיניך לברך את עמך ישראל, בכל עת ובכל שעה, בשלומך. שים שלום, טובה וברכה, אין בחסד ברחמים ברחמים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל ישראל עמך. ברוך אתה אדוני המברך את עמו ישראל בשלום. Let's read together on the bottom of page 336. I need strength, humility, courage, patience. Strength to control my passions, humility to assess my own worth, courage to rise above defeats, patience to cleanse myself of imperfections, and wisdom to learn and live by our sacred teachings. Let me not be discouraged by my failings. Let me take from heart from all that is good and noble in my character. Keep me from falling victim to cynicism. Teach me sincerity and enthusiasm. Endow me with perception and courage, that I may serve others with compassion and love. Oseh shalom bimromav, uyaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, Yahaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'achol Yisrael. Okay, good Shabbos, everybody. Good Shabbos. Good Shabbos. Good Shabbos. A good Shabbos. It's always very confusing. The first time when somebody realizes that it's not good Shabbos. And it's the first time that somebody actually sees it spelled and you realize it's gut. Guten Shabbos. You know, it was a big surprise for me, at least as a kid.
You know? Heard that and said, "A guten Shabbos." Those Mason Dixon line people.
One of these days we're going to convince Howard to teach a Yiddish class. You don't have to teach the language, just teach us the things we need to say in the appropriate times. And I think that really would be, to me, that would be a great boon if we could do that. So this morning we read from Parshat Chayei Sarah. In a little bit we're going to read what would be, I think, the sixth Aliyah, which begins on page 161 in the Plowed Chumash and on page 124 in the Women's Commentary. So again, 124 is Women's Commentary and 161 in the Plowed Chumash. And as I said, this is towards the end of the Parsha, but it's at least I think, an interesting section about what happens when Abraham ultimately takes a wife named Keturah. And we'll talk in the Torah study about who Keturah is according to the various traditions that there might be. But I want to focus actually on one pasuk within all of this. This basically describes, again, the Parsha begins with Sarah's death. And as life continues on, right, most of the Parsha is focused on Isaac and Rebekah and finding the appropriate wife and the beginning of their life together. But as we get towards the end of Abraham's life, he dies in this Parsha as well. And before he dies, we're told that he marries Keturah. He has a number of children. Those children have other children. As you read through the names, you will notice some of them may even jump out at you as being sort of familiar sounding names, potentially more so, and we'll talk about that again in our Torah study in a little bit greater detail. I will just say ahead of time that for the Torah readings purposes, this is one of the harder things to do when you're laning, is anytime that you're talking about people's names, and especially many of these names which are not your sort of standard Hebraic names. Some of them are, some of them less so. And I'm sure actually a more learned rabbi than I would be able to play with probably every one of these names and derive some unique background or connection to many of them. I'm also wondering whether, by the way, maybe the rabbi knows the answer. Bank halumim, is this the lumim that begins at all? I mean, it's in one of the names in Hebrew, and it's the end of verse 3, right? So bank lumi, I'm just thinking whether this is the basis of all these things. But I want to focus really actually on one verse in particular, which is verse 7. So I'll read the English translation that we have in front of us, and then I'll talk a little bit about why there are a few different ways to read it and what we might take away from it. Verse 7 of chapter 25. So you're page 162 if you're in the Plaut, and it looks like page 125 in the Women's. Okay, so in the English it seems fairly straightforward. Okay, we're about to be told that Abraham dies. These are the days of the years of Abraham's life. He lived 175 years. Okay, seems very, very straightforward. Now let's look in the Hebrew just a little bit, though. So here we get a very, I think, less direct way of saying what the English translation sort of takes not really a liberty, but an attempt to make it more direct, makes the sentence a little bit, it loses something in the translation, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Ve'eli yamei shnei chayei Avraham asher chai. Okay, so let's start with there, right? Ve'ela, these are Yemei Shnei Chayei Avraham Asher Chai. So here's the first place where the translations go a certain direction, and I want to push it a little bit and take a little bit of a rabbinic flyer on this. We'll see if it will make any sense of us. But it's saying basically in the English translation, right, these are the days of the years of Abraham's life. But if we look in the Hebrew, Shnei Chayei, how else might we maybe look at that? So the word Shana means what? Year. Okay, so if we read this again, sort of in the way, these are the days of Shnei Chayei, the years of life that Abraham lived. Okay, but what if we read that word a little bit differently? Same exact root, and which means? 2. Okay, so we could be saying, which probably is the pshat reading, right? That these are the days of the years of his life. But I like to think of it possibly as telling us that actually, right, these are the days of really Abraham's, both of his lives. So what does that mean? Abraham is sort of one of and is really our paradigm example, right? This first of our people who has a real kind of relationship with God, right? An interaction, not just unidirectional, a give and a take, and is asked to do many things in his lifetime which are above and beyond what anybody else has been asked to do other than, perhaps Noah. He's lived basically, he had 2 wives, 2 sets of children. He was changed, in essence, at least we talked about last week, of the Abraham before the Akedah and the Abraham that follows, right? We see throughout his life this sort of duality, right? Who Abraham is, who Abraham wants to be, who we want Abraham to be. That I think to some degree that by using this, oftentimes this common rabbinic approach to exegesis of saying don't read the word this way but read it another way, it takes what is otherwise a sort of flat, informational kind of pasuk and actually challenges us to think about the multiple lives that we all live, right? Not just Abraham, but the reality is we all in various ways live multiple lives that are counted certainly by years, but also by experiences. We are different people to different loved ones, to our professional colleagues, to the people we meet on the street. We live lives in which we are asked to do things, again, that perhaps are beyond our capacity, or at least we think so, right? That Abraham is really this sort of lived life that is more than just one simple rendering. And we see, even in the way that it's described of how many years he lived, right? There is a much more direct way to say this sentence. It could be a third of the length. But it says, Me'at shana, 100 years, V'shim'im shana, and 70 years, V'chamesh shanim, and 5 years. So if we wanted to say it was 175, there is absolutely a more direct way to do this. But the rabbis, and Rashi in particular, he says, and I'll read you what he says, which I thought was sort of was interesting to me. So he says, 175 years, literally 100 years and 70 years and 5 years. At the age of 100 years, he was as strong as he was at 70. And at the age of 70, he was as 5 without sin. So again, the ways in which we look at Pesukim and the ways in which we can take, again, a pshat reading of the text and take it straightforward, and this is just a pasuk to say that he lived to 175 years, Bezehu, and that's it. But I think that even when you take this one pasuk and you start to break it down into pieces, as Rashi did, as just did before, we try to see if there's something more to it, right? That's so much of what Torah study is about, is not taking things just for simple, but asking if the Torah, right, if God could say this in a shorter fashion, why say it in the longer fashion? What is it that we are meant to extract from it? And in the same way, Rashi, right, he decides that he's going to break it up in this way, right, 170 and 5. It lends itself to the same logic as what I was talking about before, right? Is that each of us measures our life not in a simple linear fashion, right? We think of our lives oftentimes in chunks and blocks. We are a certain way in a certain time period, and something happens to us and we transform or we shift or we change, and that we can't just look at life as one simple linear direct kind of path. We have to be able to, especially as we reach a later point in life, and especially when we think about the length of a person's life in its totality, that we don't try to paint the 175 years as all being the same. That we don't paint Abraham as being the same as he was at the beginning, as he was at the end. And the reason why I think it's important to emphasize this is, as we were talking about last week in Torah study, as we examine and explore in great detail the lives of our patriarchs and our matriarchs, because of the nature of the way that we study Torah more often than not as Parshat HaShavua, that we exist sort of in the space of only the Parsha that we're talking about, we lose sight of the fact that actually, right, these are lives lived over oftentimes many Parshas, many different places, many different people involved, many different circumstances. And we have to, on the one hand, certainly view each individual situation for what it is, but we have to also carry these other elements as well. And so just as Abraham was, right, a 100-year-old Abraham, a 70-year-old Abraham, a 5-year-old Abraham, and a 175-year-old Abraham when he dies, that he is really all of these different parts of himself. And as I said, yes, Shnei Chaye could mean absolutely the years of his life, and Pshat reading would absolutely lend itself to that rendering. But I do also love this idea of not just two lives, but really multiples, right? A plurality of life. And I think that Abraham, if he teaches us one thing, is that he really does live many lives in many different ways and many different characteristics, and many successes and many failures. And all of it is Torah, and all of it is for us to learn from and to experience, and also to extend to ourselves a certain kind of compassion that, not that anybody in this room is, 175 years old, but I would say all of us in our own way, right? We've lived, at this point, really multiple lives, right? Multiple experiences. And to see Abraham and to see Sarah and to see our patriarchs and matriarchs in that way, as opposed to a single unchanging paradigm, I think is actually much more instructive and much more, I think, gives us a greater capacity to connect in a way that feels much more personal and much more total and complete. So with that, I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom, and may you all live to 175 years old, okay? You all made me your promises. But yeah, he lived a remarkable life. And then again, we'll talk a little bit more about all of his children who he had with his wives, and who they are, and all of those good things as well. So we're going to begin our Torah service on page 362. We'll rise in body or spirit as we do so. Ein kamocha Elohim Adonai ve'en kemasecha malchutcha malchut kol olamim umemshaltecha bechol dor v'ador. Adonai melech, Adonai mahalach, Adonai imloch leolam va'ed. Adonai hoz lemo yiten, Adonai yevarech et amo b'shalom. Abba harachamim heitiv v'rtzoncha et Zion. Tivnei chomot Yerushalayim, ki v'cha levad batachnu, melech el ram v'nisa, Adon olamim. Ki mitzion tetzei Torah, ki mitzion tetzei Torah, Udevar Adonai mi Yerushalayim, Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah, Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah, Le'amo Yisrael B'Kdushato. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad.
Echad Eloheinu Gadol Adonenu Kadosh Shemo.
Echad Eloheinu Gadol Adonenu Kadosh
Halul Adonai tihu ner homema shemo yachtav lecha Adonai hagedula v'hagevura v'hatiferet v'hanetzach v'hahod ki chol b'shamayim u'va'aretz ki chol b'shamayim u'va'aretz Adonai hamamlacha Amid nahaseh lechol herosh Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishachavu lehar kodsho Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishachavu lehar kodsho. All right, Benzi, you got to do us that. You don't have to stand up. You don't have to move. That's the way it is for the whole thing. But if you do us the honor of the brachot, it would be wonderful. I assume you've got in front of you, but would you like the big?
No, it's happened for the whole night.
It's very good. Okay. Yamod ben Sion ben Moshe Lelia Harishona.
Baruch hu et Adonai Hamborah.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Amen. Vayosef Avraham Vayikach Isha Ushema Keturah Vateled lo Et Zimaran Ve'et Yokshan Ve'et Medan Ve'et Midian Ve'et Ishbak Ve'et Shuach Shucha Vayokshan Yalad Et Sheva Ve'et Dedan Uvnei Dedan Hayu Ashurim Ultushim Ulumim Uvnei Midian Hefa Va'efer V'chanoch Va'avida Ve'elda'a Kol Eile B'nei Keturah Vayiten Avraham Et Kol Asher Lo LeYitzchak Ve'livnei HaPilagshim Asher LeAvraham Natan Avraham Matanot Vayishlachem Me'al Yitzchak Beno Be'odeinu Chai Kedma El Eretz Kedem Ve'ele Yemei Shnei Chayei Avraham Asher Chai Me'at Shana Ve'shivim Shana Ve'chamesh Shanim Vayikva Vayamot Avraham Be'seva Tova Zaken V'asavea Vayasef El Amav Vayikberu Oto Yitzchak V'Yishmael Benav El Ma'arat HaMachpelah El Sedei Ephron Ben Tzochar HaChiti Asher Al Pnei Mamre Hasadeh Asher Kana Avraham Me'et B'nei Chet Shama Kubar Avraham V'Sara Ishto Vayehi Acharei Mot Avraham Vayevarech Elohim Et Yitzchak Beno Vayeshev Yitzchak Im Be'er Lachai Roi
Baruch atah Adonai Baruch Atadonai Notein HaTorah.
Amen. Koch Benzi. Okay. Turn now to page 371 in our Sidurim as we offer our Mishaberach this morning. Mishaberach Avatenu ve'imotenu Avraham Yitzchak ve'Yaakov Sarah Rivka Rachel v'Leah v'yivarech et hacholim ha'elu. We'll begin this morning by thinking of those in our community and connected to our community in need of healing. Glenn Tinney, Tzipora Ahava, Gittel Bat Shmuel ve'Aviva, Or Nachum, Bruce Steger, Chana Ruth Bat Sarah, Jeff Baker, David Tosher, Jim Cohn, Moni Renee Banks Rathbun, Lindsay Epstein, Dolores Michka, Sylvia Orn, Yerachmiel Ben Hinda, Paloma Chauhan, Samuel Moskowitz, Chaim Leib, Joyce Weinberg, Rick Gold, Stu Pollock, Jane London, Catherine Guarino, and Muna Chava, Judy Stern, Miriam Cornfield, Raz Brody, Chana Ruth Bat Sarah, Vagel Tzipora Bat Elisheva Bat Sarah, Richard Gambino, Michelle Sawicki, Idol Basha Bat Yitzchak, Tzvi Menachem and Chaim, Rivka Bat Devora, Amy and Gavin Tucker, Janice Kurz, David Dowling, Israel Ben Yitzchak, Ben Sion Ben Moshe, Lorraine Danis, Buddy Kassoff, Shelley Newmark, David Kyle Klotman, Rivka Bat Rachel, Sarah Bat Chana, Moshe Eliezer Ben Sivia, Peretz Ben Yehuda, Leah Bat Naomi, Gedalia Ben Leah, Justin Banner, Tzipora Ahava Bat Yehudit Rachel, Jane Beard Cass, Amy Cass, Steve Levine, and Ira Madras. And of course, we'll welcome those watching at home to add your names as well. Is there anyone in the room that we're thinking of this morning?
Michael ben Gamaliel, Chana Rivka Bat Yehuda.
Ed Keen, Loretta Valsta, Linda Reiser, Mary Moore, Raina, Paul Coniscu, Don Stapleton, Amba Stapleton, Jane Koss, Kevin Major, Adrian Berger, Jonathan C., Joe D.
Okay, we'll join together. El Narefana La, El Narefana La, El Narefana La, Refua Shelema, El Narefana Lo, El Narefana Lo, El Narefana Lo, Refua Shelema. Now we'll rise again in body or spirit as we turn to page 370 at the bottom, and then we lift and dress the Torah. Okay. Yamdu Ham Yamod. Amag Bi'aveha Golel. Bezot HaTorah Asher Sam Moshe Lifnei Bnei Yisrael El Pi Adonai B'yad Moshe. Torah, 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 Tziva Lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 Tziva Lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 Tziva Lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 Tziva Lanu Moshe. It's always a challenging thing, but adding wires to the mix really makes it more challenging. Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, we've talked about this, but at this point, right? It's, I think every parent gets so good at it that you can do it in your sleep. Okay, please be seated. At least I think so. Okay. So our Haftarah this morning, if we're in the Plout Chumash, there you go. Howard's on it. 169. If you're following at home, we're looking for the first book of Kings, chapter 1, verse 1 to 31. So again, 1 Kings, chapter 1, verse 1 to 31. And we'll begin first with our blessing, back in our prayer books. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nviim tovim v'ratzav v'divreihem hanemarim be'emet Baruch atah Adonai, Habocher b'Torah u'Moshe avdo, u'Yisrael amo, u'B'nei ha'emet v'hatzedek. King David was old, well advanced in years, and even though they covered him with bedclothes, he never felt warm. For this reason, his servants suggested that they seek out a young virgin for the king to serve him, to be his nurse. She would lie close to him and warm the king. So they searched all the territory of Israel for a beautiful girl, and they found Abishag the Shunammite and brought her to the king. The girl was exceedingly beautiful, and she became the king's nurse and attended to him. But the king had no sexual knowledge of her. Thou, Adoniah, son of Chagit, exalted himself beyond his station, proclaiming, I will be king. He raised an escort of chariots, horsemen, and 50 men to run before him. He had been born after Absalom. Never in his life had his father rebuked him by asking him, why did you act in such a way? Also, he was very handsome. I think that one day I'm going to write a book of all the alsos in the Torah and otherwise. There's always a very interesting addition. Also, he's very handsome. He met with Yoav, son of Zeruiah, and Abiathar the priest, and they agreed to support him. But Zadok the priest, Benaiah, son of, this is where always the Hebrew is easier, Yehoyada. Rob, how would you pronounce that?
I'm sorry?
How would you pronounce in verse 8, son of...
I'm sorry, I'm not there.
That's all right. Yehoyada, I think, would probably be what it is. Natan the prophet, Shimi, friend of David, and the elite warriors did not side with Adoniah. Then Adoniah sacrificed sheep, oxen, and fatted calves at the stone of Zoholeth near Ein Rogel. He invited all his brothers, the king's sons, and all the royal officials who were from Judah. But he did not invite Natan the prophet, or Benaiah, or the elite warriors, or his brother Solomon. Nathan then went to see Solomon's mother, Bathsheba, and said to her, have you heard about Adoniah, son of Chagit, is calling himself king? And David knows nothing about it. Now look, let me give you advice that will save your life and the life of your son Solomon. Go at once to King David and say, my lord king, did you not swear to your servant saying, your son Solomon will follow me as king and sit on my throne? Why then has Adoniah become king? And while you are standing there talking with the king, I will join you and confirm your words. So Bathsheba went to see the king in his bedroom. The king was very old, and Abishag the Shunammite was attending him. Bathsheba bowed low before the king, who said, what do you want? She answered him, my lord, you swore to me by the eternal your God that Solomon your son will follow me as king. He will sit on my throne. And now look, Adoniah is acting as king. And you, my lord, the king, do not even know it. He has sacrificed oxen, fatted calves, sheep, many of them, and invited all the king's sons and Abiathar the priest and Joab, son of Zeruiah, the army's commander. But your servant Solomon he did not invite. Now, Adonai, my lord king, the eyes of all Israel are upon you to see who will sit on your throne when you are gone. If you do not tell them, then as soon as you are lying down with your ancestors, my son Solomon and I will be treated as rebels. While she was still speaking with the king, Natan the prophet arrived. The king was told that Natan the prophet was there, and Natan came in and bowed low before the king. Natan said, my lord king, have you said that Adoniah should rule after you and sit on your throne? Today he has gone down and sacrificed many oxen, fatted calves, and sheep. He invited all the king's sons and the army officers and Abiathar the priest. And right now they are eating and drinking and shouting, long live King Adoniah. But as for your servant, as for me and Zadok the priest, and Benaiah son of Jehoiada, and your servant Solomon, us he did not invite. Could it be that my lord the king ordered this without telling your servant who will sit on the throne after you? This was King David's answer. Bring Bathsheba back. So she came back and stood before the king. David then took an oath, saying, as the Eternal lives, who has rescued me from every distress, just as I once swore to you by the Eternal, the God of Israel, that your son Solomon would rule after me and sit on my throne, I will carry it out this very day. Then Bathsheba bowed low to the ground and paid homage to the king and said, let my lord King David live forever. We'll turn back to our prayer books, page 372. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, sur kol haolamim, tzadik bechol adorot, האל הנאמן האומר ועושה, המדבר ומקיים, שכל דבריו אמת וצדק, על התורה ועל העבודה ועל הנביאים ועל יום השבת הזה, שנתת לנו אדוני אלוהינו, לקדושה ולמנוחה, לכבוד ולתפארת. על הכל אדוני אלוהינו אנחנו מודים לך ומברכים אותך. יתברך שמך בפי כל חי תמיד לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת. Amen. We'll rise again in body or spirit as we turn to page 376 to offer a prayer for our country. O guardian of life and liberty, may our nation always merit your protection. Teach us to give thanks for what we have by sharing it with those who are in need. Keep our eyes open to the wonders of creation and alert to the care of the earth. May we never be lazy in the work of peace. May we honor those who have died in defense of our ideals. Grant our leaders wisdom and forbearance. May they govern with justice and compassion. Help us all to appreciate one another and to respect the many ways that we may serve you. May our homes be safe from affliction and strife, and our country be sound in body and spirit. Amen. Remain standing again in body or spirit as we turn to page 377, a prayer for the state of Israel. Avinu Shabashamayim Sur Yisrael Begoalo Barech et Medinat Yisrael Reshit Smichat Gulatenu Hagen Aleha Be'evrat Chastecha Ufros Aleha Sukat Shlomecha Ushlach Orcha V'amitcha L'Rasheha Sareha V'yiratzeha V'takneim Be'etzah Tova Milfanecha V'natata Shalom Ba'aretz L'simchat Olam Liyoshveha V'nomar Amen. O Heavenly One, Protector and Redeemer of Israel, bless the state of Israel which marks the dawning of hope for all who seek peace. Shield it beneath the wings of your love, spread over it the canopy of your peace. Send your light and truth to all who lead and advise, guiding them with your good counsel. Establish peace in the land and fullness of joy for all who dwell there. Amen. And we'll remain standing again in body or spirit as we turn to page 374 as we conclude the Torah service. Yehalelu et Shem Adonai, ki nizkav Shemo levado, Odo al eretz v'shamayim, v'yarem keren liyamo, v'hila lechol chasidav, libnei Yisrael, am kerovo. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Ki lekach tov natati lachem torati, al tazovu. Et chaim ehi lamachasikim ba, v'tomcheha meushar, deracheha darchei noam, v'chol netivoteha shalom. Hashivenu Adonai Elecha v'nashuva, Chadesh, Chadesh Yameinu, Chadesh Yameinu Kekedem. Remain standing as we turn to page 586 at the bottom of the page, Aleinu L'Shabeach. Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, latet gdula liyotzer breshit, shelo asanu kigoye aratzot, velo samanu kimishpechot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkeinu kahem, vegor aleinu kechol hamonam, v'anachnu kor'im, umishtachavim, umodim, Lifnei melech malchei hamlachim, hakadosh baruch hu. V'ne'emar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz. Bayom hahu yeh Adonai echad. U'shemo echad. Now ask those in mourning and those observing yard site to please remain standing. Everyone else may be seated. I think first of those who passed in our community in recent months. Sylvia Alderman, Morris Dickstein, Fred Eber, Sandra Furman, Evelyn Gelb, Arthur Grossman, Elaine Grossman, Jeanette Kopp, William Lipman, Audrey Lubo, Morty Lynn, Jerry Monroe, Harry Olstein, Danielle Lisa Rigg, Geraldine Rosen, Harriet Roth, Jeannie Rubin, Howard Schreier, Dorothy Shupnick, Paul Silver, Marlise Silverberg, Blanche Sklar, Rita Sandra Snyder, Joan Strong Tanzilius, Virginia Tizer. We also mark the art sites that occurred during the last week for Robert Abel, Nathan Blank, Herbert Blutt, Harold Carl, Helen Cassell, Lillian Daphner, Howard Friedman, William Gantz, Marilyn Ginsberg, Martin Gisk, Lucy Gladstone, Charles Goldberg, Anna Grossman, Ralph Caton, Hannah Leonard, Lillian Levy, Seth Lowe, Benjamin Massoff, Bruce Mello, Bernice Miller, Maya Rosofsky, Jack Raich, Albert Robbins, William Rocker, Benjamin Rubin, Paul Schenker, Hy Weinberg, and Marion Weller. Does anyone else have a name of someone for whom you're saying Kaddish that we didn't mention? And of course, for those watching at home, you can mention names as well. We turn to page 598 for the Mourner's Kaddish. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah. Be'alma divrach irutei v'yamlich malchutei. B'chayechon u'b'yomechon u'chayei dechol beit Yisrael. V'agalav izman karib v'imru amen. Yehei shemei rabbah mebarach le'alam le'almei almaya. V'yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitba'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dechudsha b'richu. Le'elah min kol birchata b'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shalom rabba min shemaya v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Zichronam livracha, may every one of their memories be for a blessing. Shabbat shalom, everyone. Some quick announcements. First is, of course, to join us for Torah study at 12 o'clock on Zoom. And while we're talking Torah study, next week is the first Shabbat of the month. So our Torah study will be led and facilitated by Rabbi Rebecca Joseph, who's going to be leading our Women's Torah Commentary Torah discussion. And as she has taught us in the past, a remarkable teacher of Torah. It should be really a wonderful opportunity to learn. So again, that is next Shabbat, 12 o'clock, open to all on Zoom. If you can, try to be on a couple minutes early too, so we can maximize the time that we have with her. A few other announcements. Monday, Nida Mitzvah will meet at 11:30. Hebrew School is at 3:30. Social Justice Committee will have its meeting online at 5. My class will be on Wednesday at noon, and my Heschel class is Wednesday at noon. My Siddur class is Fridays at 9:15. Also, a reminder that Shelly and I have started a program, a sort of Tat Shabbat program, Friday afternoons from 4 to 5. So it's, little kids, 5 and under. You're welcome to bring any that you happen to know, and it's crafts and brachot and a little bit of, challah making that eventually gets baked at home. It's very cute. So again, when the weather's been nice, we've been able to do it outside, but I think probably this was the last week where that was even a possibility. So it will be downstairs in the social hall, but we'll be there to wave everybody in, again, 4 to 5 o'clock. And we'll have Cantor Lauren back for the next couple of weeks, which is great. And a reminder that November is upon us, almost. A lot of things in the calendar to keep an eye out for, especially at the end of the month as we celebrate Hanukkah, believe it or not. November 28th, the first night of Hanukkah, we'll be at the Wharf, as we had been for every year other than last year, which I'm really glad we'll be able to do this again. And a few other really great cultural events, so just keep an eye on all those things.
Ruth Joseph's birthday this week.
It was? I didn't know that. So we'll wish her a happy birthday at Torah study. But that's it. Ruth, if you're watching, I didn't know it was your birthday. You didn't tell me. Now I feel bad that I didn't say happy birthday. Ruth's birthday. Happy. I'm not sure at the moment, by the way, given the new setup with this mic, whether anybody can hear anything that's happening behind or not. But everybody said happy birthday to you, Ruth. That's the most important thing. All 100 of them. They're all right. All right. So, good Shabbos, everybody. Let's end with Adon Olam and Kiddush. So, Adon Olam, page 625. Adon Olam asher malach v'terem kol yetzir nivra li'et nasa b'chevtzo kol ha'zai melech Shemo nikra be'acharei kichlot hakol levado yimloch nora be'u haya be'u hovem be'u והוא אחד מן שני. להמשילו להחמירה, בלי ראשית, בלי תכלית, ולא העוז והמשרה, והוא אלי וחי גואלי, בצור חבלי, בעת צרה, והוא ניסי ומנוס לי, מנת כוסי ביום אקרא, בידו אף רוחי, בעת אישן והעירה, ועם רוחי יביאתי, אדוני לי ולא יירא. Okay, we'll rise in body or spirit for Kiddush, page 604. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל, אותי לעולם, אותי לעולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. וביום השביעי שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. על כן ברך את יום השבת ויקדשהו סברי. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם בורא פרי הגפן. L'chaim. Good Shabbos to everybody. Good Shabbos to the camera. Good Shabbos. Good Shabbos. Good Shabbos. Okay, we'll wave goodbye to y'all. Turn this thing. Okay.